Or that would be granted.
Opening that order, please raise the vote.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on the agenda is public hearings. It's in Chestnut. Open the public hearing at 4:31 p.m. Anyone who wishes to speak, raise your hand. When I call on you, please give your name and move to us. Anybody?
Once again, 8 Chestnut Street. I didn't hear what you said. Sorry.
Just name and address what you did, so please let us know.
But I didn't know which thing on the agenda you were
This is
saying.
this is the public hearing.
You can talk about anything at this time.
Oh, okay.
No, not that.
Okay.
We can talk about 10 Chestnut Street.
Oh,
20 glance.
No, it's a public hearing.
Yeah, I just saw number 3 was a public hearing for 10 Chestnut. I think that's where the question came up. So we started with number 3.
Number three is addressing the issues. We're now in the public hearing. Anybody who
Okay,
wants to speak
got it.
about Chestnut Street, 10 Chestnut Street, please.
Mark Kingsley, I represent 12 Chestnut, 16 Chestnut, and 180 Main Street. So, I guess first, the current project, I mean, it's not conforming, and really, it's not appropriate for the neighborhood. I keep hearing people, they compare it to being at Cooperstown, which really isn't a fair evaluation. The inn is 3 buildings away from Main Street, and mostly surrounded by commercial businesses or properties zoned as business. The 2 exceptions are 12 Chestnut and 180 Main, which I own. And we built 12 to fit with the current laws at that time, which were R2 and single family, and that seemed to be the place where single families really started. So we wanted to stay in line with that. And it also fit in with the rest of the neighborhood, which are all primarily single family homes. The proposed apartment complex presents many safety hazards as well. It's going to increase traffic on a 1-lane alley. Sure, they're going to build a 2-lane out to Pine, which is going to increase traffic on Pine as well. There's potential restricted access for emergency vehicles. I know that's trying to be addressed, but that's still problematic. and no green space for families and children to play, which I think might be another safety issue is, what are the kids going to do? Are they going to ride their bicycles through my parking lot? They're going to ride them down the alley? Where are they going to do stuff? And I'm really concerned about that because there will be a lot of traffic up and down those alleys. And I don't know how that's going to be addressed. They have the lot in the back. I think they're kind of holding on to that to see how this whole process goes and the approval. And here again, that can be further development potentially, which is going to add even more density, more traffic, and more, probably some more problems, or at least unintended consequences for how this can be moved forward. The neighbors there were not opposed to some development, but a 13+ unit apartment complex, and I say plus because they still have that lot in the back which could be developed. So this could be more than just the 13 units. And it's going to be on a block of predominantly single-family homes. Lack of parking for visitors. That presents a big issue for me at being at Cooperstown. From my experience, we've been there, we just started our 19th year there. From my experience, past experiences, we have people from the ticket office parked there. We have contractors that work on Veronica's house parked there, but she's been really good about it. Contractors from Matt Hazard's house parked there. People from the Clark Foundation parked there to do maintenance and stuff. I'm constantly having to get people to get out of the parking spaces that are reserved. We have a couple of extras for our guests, but we can't park the whole neighborhood either. So they have no visitor parking for this thing. So where are the people going to park when family and friends come? I can tell you where they're going to park. They're going to try to park in our parking lot. And unfortunately, that's going to be, I've had good rapport with the neighbors already, and we've gotten down to 1 or 2 few instances with parking issues now, and they move them. But I'm going to have to install security cameras, put up signs. I'm going to have to aggressively enforce the no parking unless you're a guest. I don't want to be that neighbor, but I'm going to be forced to be that neighbor. I'll have no choice about that. One thing I found kind of disturbing was with the Board of Trustees, the neighbors along Chestnut and Pine submitted a letter opposing this project. I heard the Board of Trustees didn't feel it warranted much notice as only the neighbors on those streets were opposed to this. I kind of find that disturbing, as in they're taking more of a side with people who submit letters in support that won't be directly impacted with it at all. I just find that unconscionable and just inappropriate that you have 22 signatures of people directly impacted by this. And it's more the scale and scope, not that there's a development, but the scale and scope of this that I just find mind-blowing, really. I'm kind of lost for words for this. What we'd really like to see is something that is conforming, fits more with the neighborhood, that could provide maybe some green space as well. Maybe not have quite the height. You have 2 single-family homes on it, and now it just got a height variance of almost a foot. So, it's going to tower over the 2 houses next to it. I think this is going to really eat at erode the foundation for the neighborhood and really shred the fabric of the village, because we don't know what this will lead to in the future for other developments in the village. And I think really everyone needs to kind of take a step back and really look at this hard and think of it. This has been going through the board. I've seen people try to get a sign done that's taken longer than this. I really think we need to take a step back and think about this really in the whole picture, not just Chestnut Street, but the whole picture of the village and what this can open up to for other developments and other lots, and how this might drastically change the whole character of the village. So I hope you will not approve it. We can all sit down and come up with maybe another plan that's more appropriate and think about the long-term effects of the decision you guys might make. So, thank you.
Anyone else?
Ted Fury, 4 Chestnut. First thing as I start, I agree with some of the comments made by the planning board at the last meeting about not having sort of a set process for going through site plan review. Being familiar with the town of Otsego, there is a set planning board review shall include. And there are 11 things, A through K, that need to go through, compatibility with the comprehensive plan, compatibility with the neighborhood, all things that sort of get hit on, but not something that I've seen the planning board sort of step by step walk through, right? Getting the safety, is the room for fire engines, things like that. So in general, I'll keep my comments sort of concise to, the issues I see, but, I'd like to express my concern that the proposal remains overly dense. It's not in character with the surrounding single family parcels. All the adjacent parcels are single family or zoned R3 residential. My research and other upstate zoning laws, which I mentioned to the village board, show that Tasmanian skinny atlas will have requirements of 4,000 square feet of land per living unit. So for this 20,000-ish foot lot, that would be 5 units, far cry from the 13 units on this lot. Everything that says it's too dense, it's like, what is something to set a level? And that's all across upstate New York, everything is sort of 9 to 12 units per acre. The highest I could find, well, actually Glens Falls is 18. Saratoga Springs is also 18, and that's in a high density development, which requires 5 acres. So going to 28 units, per acre is just huge. A computer, to put the density in perspective, there are 21 parking spots between the entrance to Doubleday Court and the flagpole on Pioneer Street, right? It's a long distance to fit in 21 cars. That distance is very similar to the distance from Chestnut all the way through to Pine, not including Kingsley's house. So computer may have fit, 21 spots on the site plan by ignoring our buffering laws and asking for variances, but that no way means it's in harmony with the site or the neighborhood, or just makes sense in practice there. The most compatible property the village does, the most comparable, I think, is the Cooper Lane Apartments, and that's 52 units on 3.8 acres. So that's 13 units per acre. So this is 13 units on half an acre. So it's double the density of something that, arguably does work in the village. So I think we're really pushing the density. I'm also worried about the precedent that it sets for the whole village. There's been this push for saying everybody is NIMBY, not my backyard, because it is the local people that really notice this. And it's fine to dehumanize the neighbors and try to sort of make them an obstacle to this. But I think the big problem is the entire village, right? Improving something with this density, the village has to do it the rest of the village, right? And, any other developer that comes in wants to put parking spots along the lot line, 28 units of acre, they've got legal standing to do it. So any third of an acre lot in town, is right now for 9 units, the associated cars, the associated runoff. I just don't think the village wants that. It's not what we're selling, it's, a small village. And the energy efficiency precedent, maybe we're there, maybe we're past, but we've finally taken out of the village code that sash windows are more energy efficient than new windows. But right, we can't continue to force property owners to keep up expensive maintenance and repair on historic properties if new properties are allowed to sort of skirt all those requirements. So yeah, I think everybody in the neighborhood is in favor of housing. Everybody would like to see 10 Chestnut developed. However, I believe it should meet the current zoning laws, and it should be in harmony with the adjacent properties. And I just see this proposal failing on both those counts. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Karen Crispin, 9 Pine Boulevard and 15 Pine Boulevard. I want to reiterate everything I've said before at all these meetings. This is too big for the lot. It is just too big for the lot. It is just too big for the lot. It is just too big for the lot. I would really wish that the boards would take that into consideration. I am not standing here for myself. I am standing here for every other person that has come before all the boards in the village and have been put through painstaking, nitpicking, excruciating, detail-seeking answers or solutions, or go home and redo this again. This is why I am standing here before the board. This project has gone through too quickly without any pushback. And again, I would like to back up what Mark Kinsley is saying. I would like to back up what Ted is saying. We all believe, yes, the property needs to be developed. It needs to be developed in the proper way as the zoning laws were written. The board spent excruciating years in detail, planning and replanning over a long period of time with the village input. And then for all that to be thrown aside because two people want to put this massive steamship, cruise ship, park it right in, pull it in with two tugboats in between these buildings. That's what it's gonna look like. A cruise ship with all these windows all along the side. It just does not fit our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
If I can approach this very briefly. My name is Mae Tour, from a law firm of Tour and Barone in Albany, New York. And I have correspondence to the board. I brought copies for everyone. I'm sure that you would be able to. Yes, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I've been listening to what your neighbors are saying. I represent Mark Kingsley in the inn here at Cooperstown. And, you know, I'm not from Cooperstown, obviously. I'm here from Albany, and I apologize for being a little late. But I've come to Cooperstown many times. I have family in Sharon Springs. And whenever we come to Cooperstown, because Cooperstown is a unique, beautiful, and historic place. And it's known as that across the United States. I mean, your residents, you have roughly 2,000 residents, except in the summer. And even as I pulled in today, I noticed that, you know, there's people bustling on the streets, even with COVID, even with the pandemic. People come here to see Cooperstown, to experience Cooperstown. And the entire aura of Cooperstown is a historic, beautiful place, you know, America's hometown. And you as a planning board get the unique privilege of protecting that. And this project debases that. It's a project out of a different place and a different time. And to listen to the comments of your residents, you know, you're really lucky that you have caring people who look at your code and look at your community and say, we're here to protect this. My client is not opposed to any project here. He's not even opposed to this project per se. It's the scale of it. And if you look at the provisions of site plan review, you folks have some very unique abilities to take into consideration the most important issues that protect your community. Issues like safety, you know, that this is not something that creates hazards, either for your community or for the people that live there. You know, one of the issues is green space, that there's pretty limited green space once you put this, and I love the expression, cruise ship on this lot. Because when you look at the amount of green space and you look at the number of units, and we have to assume, I think that you want families and children in these locations, it's just not safe. So what are those kids gonna do? They're gonna do what kids do. They're gonna get on their bicycles. They're gonna go in the road. They're gonna go all over town. It's not a safe location. There should be adequate green space left on the property for children to play, for people to recreate. The other issue with spacing is parking. And it's not just a numbers game. I know technically that this has complied with the numbers that your code require. 1 bedroom, 1 parking space. Probably an underestimate. You know, most people, you got a couple, they're gonna have more than 1 car. But even if they don't, it's also Cooperstown in winter as well as Cooperstown in summer. Where does the snow go? What happens to those parking lots? What is the village's liability when we don't have some place to put that snow and people don't have some place to put their cars? So it creates even more safety issues in winter. We don't know, there's nothing in the record at least, the availability for large-scale trucks to get in and out, fire trucks to get in and out. I know right now there's talk about changing the streets from 2-way to 1-way and that will help. But I don't see a traffic study that indicates what's that impact going to be on the surrounding community. This is a big change for this little area of the town. And I know that you received a letter from, or the town board received a letter from 22 individuals opposing it. Well, it wasn't just 22 people from wherever they could be found. It was 22 people from the streets that border this project. And 22 people out of 2,000 would be 10%. 22 people out of the surrounding area is a huge contribution of input.
Just a correction, it would be 1%. 22 out of 2,000 is
You're correct.
1.1%, I believe. Thank you.
It's a huge impact on the people that are immediately around this project. And you also have not just the opportunity, but the obligation to protect those people, to make sure that a project that goes forward here in a location that needs development, that can use development, is an enhancement and that works with all of the people in the community. Landscaping and buffering. I've looked at the pictures. I mean, if you put this project in some place like Saratoga Springs was an example, it would be a different type of impact because that's a project, that's an area with a lot of those big scale developments. And so the buffering would be adequate. But in small town, which is really what Cooperstown is, those impacts are very different. You know, the fencing that's being put up is fencing that's intended to provide some protection, both to the neighbors and to the property itself. But again, it becomes out of scale with what's on that block and what Cooperstown looks like. This is a historic village. Appearances matter. How things look matter. The hearing that went forward at the Architectural Review Board the other night, which I had the opportunity to watch, you know, there was a dispute as to whether or not we should get input from SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Organization. And 2 board members had apparently made inquiry. And they received 2 very different responses. One was that this is not compatible, and one was that it was. A board member said, let's put it back to SHPO and see what they said. And the response was, we get to make the decision, not SHPO. That's true, but why wouldn't you want more information? Why wouldn't you want to know, how does this fit? And the response was, we have 62 days to make a decision. I'm curious as to why time is so much of the essence. The applicant can always choose to waive those 62 days. You can ask the applicant to waive those 62 days. You have the same 62-day requirement once you close this public hearing. As of right now, I have a FOIL request in with the village. I have not received the response. I don't think the village is being dilatory. It's the time frame. That by the time you make a request and the village gets to it, and they have their 20 days to respond, you don't get the information. The applicant has an August 2nd set of plans up on their website. Well, at the board meeting, the Architectural Review Board meeting the other night, or the Historical Review Board meeting, they were talking about changes that are not on those plans. So we're sitting here at a public hearing, commenting on a project the neighborhood doesn't want, that we really actually haven't had the opportunity to finally review. So I would ask at a minimum that you keep the public hearing open so that people have an opportunity to see, and you have an opportunity to see, what does this project really look like? And then have an opportunity to have comment on what this project really is so that you can make an assessment as to what this project needs to be the best thing for Cooperstown, not the best thing for two developers. And I know these developers mean a lot to this community. That, you know, they are involved with an organization that's critical to your community. They should understand that too, that the more people who have an opportunity to look at this project, review this project, give you full input, the better project it can be for the community, can be welcomed into the community, it can be what you need it to be. It's not just a question of downward facing lighting in the parking lots. It's also a question of what's the lighting overall impact. Has anybody done a night sky study on this project? There's a lot of stuff that's not in there yet. And I would ask that you require the applicant to give you that information, to give you the traffic studies, to give you the night sky studies, to give you the type of full range of impacts that this project has before the planning board, so that you can make a decision for your community that's good for the project and good for your community. So I would ask in closing that you leave the public hearing open until such time as final plans are filed and people have an opportunity to really see what's going in their backyard. Thank you.
I can't comment on the freedom of information for filing because I've never seen it. The first I heard it. But the plans are all been publicly available in the clerk's office right across the hall. For quite some time.
And we have reviewed them, and we've reviewed the plans that are on the website of the applicant. However, they're not required to provide all information that's submitted to the village. And frequently that information is very insightful and colors what a project full impacts are. Things like traffic studies, lighting studies, things that typically are part of the record before the boards that review it, as well as the community that lives with it.
As far as I know, there are no traffic studies, no lighting studies. So
I think that tells you one of the things that the planning board can do, and that is, we need this information before we can do a final site plan review. So, I humbly suggest that you take the opportunity as a board within your powers to say, we need all the information to make sure this is the right project done in the right way for this community. Thank you.
anybody else?
Josh Edmonds, 45 Delaware Street. I can speak now, speak later. I guess it might make sense to speak now.
You're speaking now about the project or is?
I'll speak at the public hearing,
Okay.
or I can speak at the project.
When we get to it, okay, that's fine.
So,
Please go ahead.
okay. Josh Edmonds, 45 Delaware Street. You can use words to say a lot of different things. Things as cruise ships or all kinds of different things. And I think that there has been a lot of public input on this project over a number of months. I think this is the third or fourth time the planning board that we've been before the planning board. We were before you guys back with the trustees, and back with trustees. There's been a lot of public comment on it. There's been, I don't know, 60 letters or so. There's been quite a few, and overwhelmingly in favor of the project from residents from all over the village. And there's a lot of comments about zoning, about how this project is illegal according to zoning, which is just not accurate. Variants are part of the village code. Most houses in the village require variances, whether it's a variance for a setback, which this project doesn't have. This project has some minor variances. It has an 11-inch height variance, which is not significant. It has a unique situation in the village where it has public lanes on 3 sides of it. There's a lot of talk about precedent and that this project is going to set precedent for all across the village, but I would argue that it's very difficult to find another property that you could do a project anything like this on. There's maybe one other in a commercial district, but this project is somewhat unique in its nature in the fact of where it's located. There is one house, one residential house between this property and Main Street. The rest are all commercial properties. And so Mark commented that, you know, he figured the inn was the last commercial property there, but the property that is existing that we're planning to remove has been a commercial project for 100 years. And it's been that way. It's been vacant and just sort of sitting there for, I don't know, longer than I've been around. And so kind of when you look at this, it is kind of a unique project that fits a unique location. And you can talk a lot about safety and green space and parking and say that, you know, kids are going to ride their bikes and get hit by trucks, but it's one thing to create safety issues where they're just not there. I mean, it's like saying my kids are going to ride down my driveway and get hit by a car. And it's like, well, they certainly could, but hopefully they would know to ride on the sidewalk or, you know, different things like that. And so there's a lot of comments that are creating issues that I don't know if they're actually issues. And I think that that's something that we can discuss a little bit when we talk about the site plan and parking and buffering and some of those different aspects. And I don't think this is a project just for two developers. I think if you read through the various letters that have been written to the village, I think it's clear that this serves a much larger purpose than just for Francesca and I. And so I welcome the site plan review, and I think it needs to be thorough. And I think that a lot has been done to provide a comprehensive site plan. And in the same way that, you know, the board, being you guys, you know, look at projects to see whether lighting studies are warranted or whether traffic studies are warranted. And there's projects that warrant them and there's projects that don't. A maximum of 21 cars on Chestnut Street. I mean, if you sit at Chestnut Street for more than 10 minutes, you'll have 150, 200 cars go by you. And so adding 21 cars to what's probably 10,000 cars in a day doesn't seem significant. And so I think those are all the things that we'll look at here. So.
Walking upon 12 Main Street, I would, a couple of points. I mean, that this project in terms of scale has been shoehorned into a very, very narrow piece of property. Land or whatever. I talked to my attorney, and so I'm very careful what I say, so I'm not infringing on the other committee I serve on in the village. But having said that, I think that the key thing that I want you people to think about is the fact that there's no one on Pine Boulevard who wants this piece of construction as it's presently designed. No one. And I think I made this point before, but I think that we as committees have a right to defend these citizens. And so that if they feel they're being railroaded, which they do, then I think it's appalling that this committee or any other committee reflects the feelings of the people who've been there for years on this on Pine Boulevard. Having said that, I think that it's just it's criminal not to come to their defense. So that in terms of the studies, I was on the studies that were done at the hospital parking lot in Bassett Hall. Very careful studies were done where the lights were going to go in the parking lot behind Bassett Hall so that it would shine on the homes on Susquehanna Avenue. And that was very carefully tended to, so the wall on the edge of the parking lot defended that so that people were not bothered by headlights. There are a lot of studies that need to be done on this project. I think the scope of it is enormous. And we're trying to shoehorn into this, you know, the talk is, I think, it's too big for what we're trying to do. From couch to the whole project was couch because we need more housing. There's no question we need more housing in this village. I would question whether this is low income housing, or the prices they're asking, the prices they're tentatively asking for the apartments, but nevertheless, I'm not against more housing, but I am against trying to shoehorn into this narrow piece of property with all kinds of problems with the design. I think it's a mistake, big mistake. You know, I wouldn't mention H Park at all. So Gene, well, anyway, that's it, thank you.
Thank you.
I just had to clarify a couple things that Josh said about one, creating the situations and safety. I've only been in for 19 years. I've already seen stuff, people walking through the parking lot, up and down the alley. One guy almost got hit on a motorcycle. It's not an imaginary thing, it's a real thing. I see it all the time. This will just add more. Now, there may be some ways to mitigate it, I don't know, but that's what part of the site plan is, to look at this and figure out how could we mitigate this and make sure that it is actually as safe as can be. He also mentioned that this has been a commercial building for like 100 years. It's not, it reverted back to R2 years ago, the same with the inn at Cooperstown, reverted back to R2. Neither one of those have been a commercial property or listed as commercial property for, over 20 years now. So that's not true. And then Roger, he mentioned everyone on Pine Boulevard opposed to this. Well, in the section of Chestnut, there's at least 4 out of the 5 that I know of that are opposed to this. So overwhelmingly on Pine and Chestnut, you have 22 people that are not in favor of the scale and scope of this. We're in favor of something being built, but not this size and scale. And that's really what we're trying to get to, that we're not opposed to something, but let's look at this and see what can work and what will work for them and for the neighborhood, financially, safety, everything, because we would like to have something in there. And I know with them, financially, some things don't make sense and others, well, they kind of knew that when they got into this, and I can't really claim a financial hardship, it's self-created. So, but maybe we can all work together to figure out something that could work and be financially viable. But, it's up to you guys. Thank you.
Robert Nelson, 20 Fair Street. I certainly can't speak for the entire village community. I mean, you have people on Pine, you have people on Chestnut that are who live in that area who, let's say, are a bit negative on this project. But that's a certain percentage of people who live right there. And again, there are so many people who live a few blocks away that they also, let's say, are for a project like this, mainly because, and I don't want you to lose fact, I've been to so many of these committee meetings, please do not lose fact of the, let's say, the 13 apartments that will bring people into Cooperstown that will, and we're not saying it's low income, we're not saying it's not, with 13 apartments. So that will keep people in Cooperstown so when they work here, that they will not have to drive 20, 30, 40 miles to come into the village to get some work. Now, when you want to do that traffic study business, walk on Main Street and people are jaywalking like crazy, and I'm more worried about things like that. Outside, don't just pick on that one little spot. Pick on Main Street. Look at that disaster with the parking, with people jaywalking across the street. Again, don't lose track of the people who want to move here, not move away, and that they can be close, spending money in the village, and they can be close to the places that they work. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'll keep the public hearing open while we address other items of the agenda. I'll ask for comments again right before we address the project. Just want to mention that sure that's in Tumor.
Yes, thank you.
You have your letter, which is part of the record. And we also received a letter from Cynthia Preston, which I received this afternoon. And I'll address issues in Ms. Peterson's letter as we discuss this during a regular agenda.
This is what it is.
There's also a report from the tree committee to the June 7th. David, this mentions a number of your concerns. If you'd like to take a look at this and then we can go through these as part of the record, as long as you're here, I'd rather hear it from you than as part of the. Take your time to look at it. And if you want, I'll call it when we get back to this time to review it. The first item on the regular agenda is 20 Glen Avenue. It's a proposal for a subdivision. Is the applicant there? Do you want to discuss this at all?
No, I'm here so that they have any questions they can ask me.
Okay. The review is at our June meeting. And the concern we have was that if the subdivision is approved because of the properties that are currently on the lot.
I'm having trouble hearing you, sir.
I can't hear you.
I'll
Good.
take this off, sit a little further back, so.
Thank you.
And then, it would create on one of the lots, one family building.
Excuse me?
It would create, on one lot, there would be two buildings that would be occupied, is that correct?
Yes, the one property is a two-family unit.
And the other would be one family.
That's correct.
The problem is, in our village code, since this is a commercial district, we require a special use permit to have a one or two family building on that property. I understand that this has been discussed with the village attorney. It will be proposed for a special use permit. So if we grant this application, it will be contingent on that special use permit being granted by the trustees. I just want to make sure you understand.
No, I don't. I'm not understanding what you're saying.
The zoning law permits as a matter of right multi-family dwellings in this property. You're not, as a matter of right, allowed to have either one or two family dwelling on these properties once they're split. Unless,
And what's one?
once they're split,
Once this.
unless the village trustees grant what's called a special use permit. The zoning law allows special use permits, which is the use that's allowed if the trustees approve, which means the trustees can determine whether or not this fits in a particular location. It makes sense.
It makes sense.
It makes sense to the trustees.
No, that's not a question.
Excuse me?
I was asking you if that's what you said, if it
Yeah.
makes sense.
Does it make sense? It's appropriate. If the trustees determine that it's appropriate under these circumstances to grant that variance. So we can proceed with your application. It can't be finalized unless the trustees grant the special use permit. So we can either wait for the trustees to make a decision or proceed. My preference is to proceed. Because we're all here and have the plans in front of us. So if that's okay with you, we'll
Yes.
proceed. Okay, great. Yeah. Because if we looked at this in our June meeting, our only concern at that time was the issue of the special use permit. Does anybody else have any other concerns at this point?
I move that we accept it for visual evidence, or however you want to word it, on the condition that the trustees issue that special use permit. And that's the two families, one building, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to add something to that that's probably irrelevant, but the tenant that is upstairs has been there 52 years.
Well, unfortunately,
best
it is
yet.
irrelevant, it's very nice to know.
I'll second the motion.
Motion is to approve the subdivision, subject to the trustees granting the special use permit.
Yes.
Second. All in favor? Aye. It's unanimous, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really minor changes.
Yeah.
I'm sure you got the page, the right copy. 62 Pioneer Street, number 318. The candidate's application, in essence, to replace a sign. I'm not quite sure, is everybody here from 62? Feedback? I'm not sure which. This is the existing.
Correct.
And there are two drawings here.
Yep, I believe that the upper one there states that it's the proposed new sign.
Okay.
That's a proposed.
Okay.
The rest of the others basically
This is a non-illuminated sign. It's ground level.
It's one of those can be done difference between these two.
Yeah. Yeah, the old sign is fading.
The new sidewalk.
Anybody have any comments on this? All those who approve.
My turn.
That's on your turn, okay.
I move that we approve.
Second. Motion is to approve the proposed sign as submitted, all in favor? Aye. It's unanimous, motion carried. I'd like to take, out of order to review the minutes. Since we discussed this project at length in our last meeting, I'd like to review the minutes of the last meeting before we take us down 10 next week. Does everyone have a chance to look at the minutes?
I was absent, so
Do you have them?
I have.
Oh, yeah.
I have, I was absent, so
Okay,
I've read them, but
then,
I'm impressed with that.
okay.
There's a lot.
I'll move to approve the minutes. Abstain?
I'll say, yeah.
In favor? I'll second it. Okay, 2 in favor, 1 abstention. That carries. Well, the public hearing is still open. David, or Mike, do you want to discuss?
Sure. David Dennon, at 8 Chestnut Street. Wow. The trees, we'll start with them, I guess. And maybe even I should back up before. I've spoken with Josh, I've spoken with the tree committee. With Josh, we've come to somewhat of an agreement with our property line with what trees need to be trimmed. And in fact, he had said for the most part, they wouldn't need to trim many of the trees on our side. The problem that I have, is that I think we're okay with what he had said to me last week or so with the trees in that regard. My problem with the tree committee is that they want to take down some trees that are on the corner, like, I don't know if you could visualize it, but corner of our property in Josh's. Josh's comes this way, and ours starts here. Josh's stops. Okay. What I don't know yet.
This is your problem.
Yeah.
Referring to
In the back,
corner?
where the red markings are right a little higher. Right, that's the lane. And there's a couple, 3 or so trees that they're talking about in the tree committee that they want to take down that is in the lane, but provides shade and or protection for different reasons. That's the area where the snow plow is going to come and push the snow off of Memorial Lane into what would still be village property, but undeveloped. And our concern is that because of the terrain, it drops down drastically there. And all that snow is just going to cascade into our backyard. In one of my later letters that I had written, either, I don't know if you've gotten that or not, but there's concern about that in that corner. Again, that same letter that I'm talking about, I also carbon CC Josh into it. Josh called, we came over, we talked about it. He said he was going to get together with the village and decide how that was going to be handled. Then whether he would build some sort of a drainage, I can't think of the word he used. But
Catch basin.
catch basin in that area, which would mean, some sort of excavation and just the regular work it would take to put a section of road in there. But I don't know if that's been approved yet or not, or if it's been talked with the village and they agreed to let you do that. So that part of the plan, I don't know.
So that's part of what's happening. So I think you also had a question about the things you wanted it to be 8 feet rather than 4.
Yes, and again, I thought it'd be better to try to work this out, with the builder instead of, having to go through sessions and sessions. So it had been determined, and maybe it was mentioned in the last meeting, that it would be eye level from inside of the apartments. In other words, the fence top would be eye level with somebody standing inside of the apartments. Now, I mean, if the guy's 6'8" or 5'2", it's gonna change a little bit, but it's, reasonable that would give us some privacy, in our area. I thought that seemed reasonable.
Josh, is that the 4-foot fence?
No, so I'll go over all those changes in
Okay,
a minute as soon as I start presenting plans.
okay.
So David and I met a week and a half ago
Yeah, probably.
and so I brought those changes to the historical board. And then I have them here today.
But I do disagree with the number of trees that the tree committee has said has to come down. Partly because if you leave 1 or 2 of those trees there, they're not gonna keep pushing the snow back behind our house in a whole lot of a mess with salt and dirt and debris that comes up all the whatever. It's gonna just flow down into our backyard. And maybe finally, just so it's clear, in every meeting that I've had with Josh, it's been amicable, but I've always said, I think this project is too big for this area. And that's where I start, but we're much further along right now, so we're trying to do the best we can, to keep shade in that area and keep, temperature down and everything else that goes with the cooling that trees provide. And, provide our privacy and hopefully do the best for our neighbors too.
Go ahead.
Oh, this is yours.
Thanks very much. Does anybody else want to speak? Close the public hearing at 5:27 p.m. And move on to 10 Chestnut Street, item 3, on the regular agenda.
Mr. Chairman, just one thing, I want to make sure when we do our presentation, there've been a number of various things from their counsel and from them that were completely inaccurate and not factual. So I want to make, without making a public statement now in the public hearing, I just want to make sure everything is corrected for the public record. If it's not corrected in our presentation, then we can address it afterwards. But I don't want to take more time on it since their counsel has apparently been given a lot of misinformation, it seems. So thank you, sir.
I'm sure. Okay. All right, Tom?
Okay. Okay.
Before you begin, let's sort of note that the Board of Trustees has granted a special use permit for this project. We have no authority to say or should or shouldn't be. We're only reviewing this right now. The Board of Trustees has already approved the multi-family residence in 10 Chestnut. So that's what we have. you can't tell us that. The, ZBA was granted a variance to allow placement of the trash recycling. Five, 4 inches high by 3, 8 inches wide. And the walls 6 foot 11 inches high and 1 wide, both within 5 foot setbacks. They also granted a variance to provide 11 inches relief from 30-foot height requirement. So those issues have been resolved, and we can't second guess those points.
I think there's one more
Oh,
variance.
there's two more variances.
All right, there's one more that deals with, parking buffering, on
Yes,
the parking lot of 5 or more lots from a village lane.
yeah, yeah.
So since the last planning board meeting, there's been a couple changes. We have added a handicap ramp to the front of the building. I know that the trustees had, as part of their special use permit, had asked that we work to get direct handicap access to Pine or Chestnut. Chestnut, I think, makes more sense. I think it's
Yes, there was, at our last meeting, we had an open topic of whether the trustees required an ADA compliant entrance from Pine Boulevard. And as part of their decision, was that the first Cooperstown planning board shall ensure that the ADA compliant sidewalk to Pine Boulevard is considered. We're not required to have one, only need to consider it. And we did at the last meeting until that the compliant access from Chestnut, you got it right.
okay. So we went ahead with that, and we have added a handicap ramp that comes off the front of the building right out to Chestnut Street. So that way, it alleviates some of the safety concerns. If someone had a motorized wheelchair and was having to go down the village lane, now they can just go right out from the building. So that was one change. We have added the requested signage to the private drive. We have a private drive sign here, as well as a right turn only sign here. So that way, people know when they get to Pine Boulevard, one way, they know to go right. We have also added bollard lighting for the parking here, which was previously missed. We've added downlighting here, and here, so that we have some safety lighting. I met with the Denons at 8 Chestnut to review the north side as well as some clarification for retaining walls, fence height, and how to deal with stormwater runoff. And so the current plan, our property corner is right here. And you guys should have been sent an updated sketch. Yes. Yep, from the architect. Yeah. That helps to clarify a little bit of this area here. Some of the concerns were that while this was discussed at VBA in terms of buffering neighboring residents from car headlights. And we've got, when they passed the buffering, they stipulated that cars will park nose in, with the exception of handicap spaces, which may pull in frontwards or backwards, depending on how they need to operate. And so all of these spots are then buffered. You can see the contour lines here, and so ZBA it wasn't as much of a concern. Because this was sort of naturally buffered, by the elevation change, which left this little corner section here, which faces the Dennis backyard. And so what we've added is we have, solid fencing on top of the retaining wall that will act as the buffering, and that will be, so that the retaining wall, you know, the parking levels extra feet, and then you've got, I think, about 42-inch fence on top of that to provide the buffering. And that's what's shown in the sketch. Is what you've got on top of that. And then another concern was stormwater runoff and what happens with snow. And when I met with the Dennons, it seemed as if we came out an additional 10 feet past the property line, instead of putting the catch basin right at the edge of the property line, if we put it out and pitch this area in, that would provide a space for snow to be pushed. And then the catch basin will be underneath the snow, so that when it melts, it will not run down into the Dennis backyard, it will go into the stormwater system. And then we've also included a short grade level retaining wall that extends 10 foot from the property line along the back of the Dennis to help keep, to help sort of make that stormwater catch basin possible there. There is, I don't know if you walk the site, but there are some photos, and this is the area that we are kind of talking about, where that concrete, where that chunk of concrete is essentially where that 10-foot retaining wall would be. And the top of that concrete right there is essentially at the finished grade level of where the parking is going to be at. So, so that was part of that discussion on how to deal with that corner of the building. And then the fence height was discussed with the Dennons to put it at eye level for inside the building. Because that way it would seem to provide the best amount of privacy. You know, because a 6-foot fence, if everyone can see over top of it, that doesn't work that great. And so it would be somewhere between 6 and 8 feet tall. And then based on the building elevation is where we'll set the height of that fence. So, those were a lot of the sort of the main issues that have come up. That's sort of what's been kind of new since we last met.
Josh, the addition of the handicap ramp in the front does not eliminate the one that's in the parking.
No, we've got a handicap ramp on the back here,
Right.
and there's handicap access on the side. So everything is remaining, it just is an extra level of access to business.
Okay, I think to make sure that in the summer or, you know, when there's no snow on that section that's going to extend Fenimore Lane 10 feet behind our property, I'd much rather have the catch basin closer to your property and that whatever is going to be built there slope back toward your property, so that we don't have cars thinking that they can park in there in the summer and, you know, when there's no snow. If it's another 10 foot out, even if it's Fenimore Lane, if you want to call it that, you could have 2 or 3 cars pull those first in there and park. So somehow or another, you know, we don't want to make additional parking on actual village streets.
Is it possible to flag it?
Yes,
Yellow crisscross lines, no parking zone.
Or slope it so much so that when you push the snow in, you know, but nobody's gonna want to pull their car into a sharp ramp like that and have the catch basin closer to the corner of your property. I mean, I don't know, I'm just shooting from the hip here, but actually, I have thought about this an awful lot, and I'm sure you have and everybody else has, but that's a concern if it does go to 10 extra feet. People are gonna, you know, sneak their cars in there or who knows what, motorcycles. I'm not against people, trust me, it's just that, you know, if you're trying to make it right and Let's not overextend it and make something you didn't intend it to be.
Sure.
Something that they're gonna use it for. Thank you.
Construction folks, change.
I'm open to whatever kind of works best. The only reason we extended this 10 feet was to make sure that snow doesn't go into the dens. And it is true that that could very inadvertently become a parking spot for somebody. I don't know if no parking signs would help. I don't know that we can pitch it enough to discourage people from parking on it. I mean, a foot is a lot of pitch, but people would still park on that if they were motivated. And so, yeah.
That's why I would like to leave those trees that are there.
And I haven't seen the tree committee's report as to what trees they're taking out. But I don't have any issue with, if they're taking out trees beyond this 10 feet, I don't know why they would need to be removed. So I don't know if, we can move the catch basin. I mean, that's no problem, but I don't know that solves, without having pitched pavement, it's hard to guarantee that we can keep the snow out of that area. And so if we can deal with it with no parking signs.
I'm going to request parking signs there, and also there is one more that discussed last week.
I'm sure it's already, you probably can't park in the, I know there's other no parking zones on village streets, down at the end of Lakefront or down at the end of Pioneer Street. When you come around, there's a no parking zone there. So.
I spoke to the director of public works, and he was of the opinion that the planning board itself doesn't have the authority to install no parking signs. So we'll make that request to the trustees.
Since we were kind of talking about parking, may I interject for just 1 second? Ask a question?
Just 1 second.
Okay, how do we plan on mitigating people parking in my parking lot and driving through my parking lot?
I don't know, I don't have to do it on the site. It's your property. You don't need to, it's fine.
Well, isn't that part of the site plan and figuring out how, we were talking about parking in that back without people driving and parking in my parking lot? Is that not part of this process or?
But what's your suggestion? Just more parking spaces?
Well, they're going to have visitors, so where the visitors going to park?
So another question, last time I drove by, last couple times, there are in-cars parked on this property. And so I don't know that our people are going to park on your property. I don't know that your people are going to park on ours. It seems like we both have adequate parking. And I mean.
Oh, I know people park in mine. If there's somebody parking in yours, let me know. We have plenty of spaces for my people to park on mine. I already know through experience in 19 years with other neighbors, we already have that problem. So don't try to say we won't, we will. I know we will. We already have it. We've had it for over 20 years. Michael had the same issue when Michael Jerome owned it. So people are going to drive through my parking lot and they're going to park in my parking lot. So is that part of the site plan to figure out how we mitigate that?
We'll discuss it.
Okay. Got it.
I think that the 2-lane driveway, I think is a part of, in terms of not driving through the ends property, which, if everyone's not familiar, that is, the parking lot is here, and there's another lane out at the ends on the other side. And that's a big piece of why this is here, is because the public alley is not wide enough for 2-way traffic. And so I don't want people inadvertently driving through the ends parking lot or the ends exit. And so this is sort of the main, way in and out, and I don't know that present hypothetical, but I don't know that it's.
Well, 20-something years of experience is not really hypothetical.
Let's not have a debate. Right?
Okay. Okay, Gene.
Public hearings are- Addressing some of the public comments. Maybe concerning scale and scope. Too big of a lot. Limited green space. No one on council wants it. And other zoning laws, I can't consider other zoning laws that might be provided, don't provide, we have to use the Village of Cooperstown zoning law. And trustees have already made a decision to allow the 13-unit development. It doesn't need to be smaller. And conform with what the trustees already decided. We discussed this issue now. The issue for the no one on council wants that we have to consider the village as a whole, not the specific law. My review of the site plan, I don't see any need for a lighting plan. Does anyone disagree?
Did you say that?
I don't see a need for a lighting plan for any study. The 21 parking spaces that will stagger in and out. I don't see any need for a traffic study.
Do you need a traffic?
Traffic study. There are only 21 parking spaces. They're not going to be all coming in at once. Won't all be leaving at once. And I don't see a need for a traffic study for that limited number of cars.
I'm not sure what a traffic study would reveal,
I don't either.
given the fact that the roadway doesn't exist yet.
No,
I understand.
no, the traffic studies would reveal how many cars go by in a given day.
At particular
At
time.
a particular time.
I have wondered about the request from this property onto Pine Boulevard, even with the right-hand turn. What does that mean for Pine Boulevard? Because if someone is coming in from Lake Street, I guess they could come in on Chestnut, but
No, there's a median.
yes, I know there is.
So,
But they would have to come in on one side of the median and then they would have to do a U-turn to
Yes.
come in and then make an entrance.
as if they were
into
coming, as if they were
the
coming from Main Street.
And they're coming from Main Street, if they're going out and they have to make a right hand turn onto that lane of Pine Boulevard, and they want to go to Main Street, will they be inclined to do the U-turn on the crossover that's just down Pine Boulevard toward Lake Street, and that could create congestion there. So that's my only concern really about the traffic movement is, how will that play out in essence? When you've got Pine Boulevard, two one-way lanes. Whether a traffic study is going to provide us insight into the traffic movement or not, I don't know.
I don't think it would go.
I'm not quite sure what the time.
Right now, all the people who are on the Chestnut side of Pine Boulevard, heading toward Main Street, have to go all the way down, or let's make another right-hand turn and go up
Right, that's right.
Chestnut to Main. So I mean, it's the issue of living in a boulevard, basically.
It's no different from anybody on Main Street who has a driveway. Some houses do.
No, that's
some houses
absolutely
don't.
right, that's absolutely right. Just there may be more people involved, but it's, as you say, not everyone's coming out at the same time.
Gene, I have a question as to what our purview is regarding keeping these residents from illegally parking. That's kind of not where we, or is it that, and I've reviewed, but I guess Mark's question was that because there'll be more cars there than there are now that the, ironically, car dealership is no longer there. It hasn't been for 35 years. Do we have jurisdiction over something like that? Well, we've been asked, how are we going to prevent residents of 10 Chestnut, 10 Chestnut from parking in Mark's drive, parking lot?
I don't see,
We don't do that.
no, I don't,
Oh,
no, I don't see that in our purview. Section 300-42, sets forth the objectives that we should address. Taking a look at the site plan. A is traffic access. To show that access is adequate, not excessive. And I think this plan deals with that. The circulation and parking adequate, bus street parking and loading spaces will be provided. And this plan meets the parking requirements of the zoning law. Landscaping, buffering, and screening. Discusses buffering, and she addressed that, and we received the variance. Compatibility is key. Light and signs will be compatible with scale. We discussed that. The environment, design, operational characteristics and proposed use will not represent a significant adverse impact on the environment. resulting in waste of land and other natural resources in the village. The trustees addressed that in their speaker. F, development, the site development plan elements, including buildings, parking, drainage, stormwater, and erosion control management, circulation signs and lighting, will not adversely affect the potential of adjacent properties to property under review for its highest and best use. This does not protect the highest and best use of adjacent property or the property itself. And G, nearby properties, in the case of residential districts, parking, pedestrian, and vehicular circulation, lighting and noise associated with the proposed plan shall not interfere with neighboring properties or with rights to enjoy the residential character of the property. Discussed pedestrian and vehicular circulation, lighting and the noise. Noise issue with having 13 residential units and the 21 parking spaces. I don't believe would interfere with the owner's right to residential character of the property.
Sticky with it sometimes. Sure. We have to follow. We have. Yeah. What the village ordinances are, not speculate on what can correct that. I was trying to say what it don't get done.
Anyone want to take a final look at these?
I've seen it. I've spent the morning here.
Unfortunately, this current part of the plan, so we just, I guess, table and talk about.
Yep, you want to write a copy of that?
Yeah, you just have to do a watch copy. Give it to Johnson. Okay. I move to approve the site plan.
I see. Are there conditions that we talked about today that have to be added to the motion? So I don't think so.
Protest.
Except for the no parking
Right.
here, that you'll have to talk to the trustees.
You have to
about.
talk to the
Yeah,
trustees.
yeah,
Yes.
but that's not a condition.
Okay.
That's something you just want to do, and then it's really up to the village. Trustees, Mitch's recommendation.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay.
Computer. Let's go.
Somebody should have called her on who's like.
Excuse me, if I could just make one comment. I was accused of making misrepresentations to you. I don't believe I made any, and I didn't hear any corrections. So I just wanted to be clear that in my estimate, everything that we represented to you is true.
I'm responsible for your FOIA request and combining materials.
And I understand that it's a constraint that the statute itself has, but I do appreciate that.
Thank you.
There you go. And,
No.
I just think it's we got to follow. Right along with you. I have carpentry in my bag. These guys. And when you go off the mass, you just watch it fly. And you say, God, there's $3,500 flying for me. He's actually locked in the dust. I mean, I'll say something. I work for this meeting. I read that. Yeah, but I'm fine. I don't want to put it against the B&B. Because the room is right upstairs. I'll wear them so I can turn the TV down. Watch the Met game commence loose in silence.
You know, but there's a 6 years and I have. I'm not,
Yes, I got
I bought the little box that goes with that hooks to the TV. All I do is just press TV and it comes right, everything comes right straight from the hearing aids and the TV can be unmuted.
You know, I think
This is
my TV.
62.
Yeah.
When I heard
That was an easy one.
Marvel,
Throw a softball.
I got this power use the power bill.
Right, yeah.
Biggest noise. Stacks up to like 60 feet.
Right.
I can actually, I can put my. We're gonna have. That's not as good. You really don't have that range. Unless it is in Jeffrey Rosen's on the other kind.
So it's one of the reasons why sometimes it's very people. This is really that little box over there connecting to the.
I'm gonna, actually, what I'm gonna look at is
Give me a call and come over and sign.
finding out 6 years old, set up the TV. Or actually,
I'm sure having.
my daughter was trying to. She was taking. She's almost assured the job with the defense system.
If they have their own sign,
They wanted.
I'm sorry, sir.
I got a full,
When you say they.
graduate village. $10,000 year study.
This is not,
And then she. My trust board.
the plan.
Yes.
Well, absolutely.
All right.
Go ahead.
You know, anticipate appeal. I mean, this is the first time.
I don't have.